as the watches with heart monitors have become more accessible, we're now starting to get more kids with those. And we've been toying around with training them not to run a pace, but to run a heart rate. And we've been somewhat on the fence as to whether it's better to actually use that heart rate as opposed to run the pace that the VDOT is telling them to run. And I wanted to pick y'all's brain on that thought as to whether it's better to just go with the VDOT or to go with the heart rate, because the heart rate can be, we find it can be all over the boards from day to day. But when we used to do the VDOT tables, we never found that the kids really had trouble hitting the paces. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, it's very important if you're going to use heart rate for any reason. It's very important that you have an accurate measure of the individual's maximum heart rate. And I'm not sure that all devices give you that. And you certainly can't use some formula where you go 220 minus your age to estimate your maximum heart rate. I've done research with runners. In fact, an Olympic gold medalist who had a maximum heart rate all out of 148. And I'll tell you what, when he was 30 years old, 220 minus 30 is 190. So you can't use some formula to determine maximum heart rate. The advantage of using heart rates, and there are advantages to going by heart rates, is that when you're on undulating terrain or not perfectly flat terrain, then you can't go by speed because the speed's going to be affected by going up and down. And if you're going up and down, I mean, you're working harder, so the heart rate's going to give you a little better measure of what's going on. So what I'd say in respond to whether to use heart rate or not, or to just the VDOT numbers, I'd use the VDOT numbers whenever you have ideal running conditions like weather and wind and undulating terrain, and maybe use the heart rate when you're over uneven terrain.
Could I ask a quick follow-up on that? What would be your best recommendation with younger kids for measuring maximum heart rate?
Yeah, that's a number one. You hope they're all on the team because they've been cleared by a doctor to be out for cross country. You don't want to be pushing anybody who isn't physically fit. So that's important. But a pretty good way to measure maximum heart rate is to have a hill that lasts about a minute, to run up the hill and have them run up the hill. And when they get to the top, measure their heart rate. Then go back down to the bottom and run it again hard and see if it's any higher. And if it goes higher, then run it a third time. If it goes higher, run it a fourth time. If it quits going higher, then you've probably reached your maximum heart rate. You could do it on a track. You could say run a 800 on the track. Run 2 laps and see what your heart rate is. Run a hard 800 and see what your heart rate is. Recover, run a second one and see if it's any higher. And if it's not any higher, then you probably got your maximum heart rate. It's good to get an accurate measure of maximum heart rate, though, and there's all kinds of devices out there now that you have to wonder whether they're giving it to you or not. I prefer using the VDOT numbers, but I also must make sure that when you're using VDOT numbers, you're running on a flat terrain.